Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of The Emma Gunn Show and a midweek instalment of Bullet Points. This week, I have a couple of things that I want to talk to you about, thoughts that have just been percolating around in my brain. And I also want to share with you a trailer from fellow podcasters from the Straight Up podcast. So the podcasting world is a slightly funny one in the sense that the only thing I had to compare it to was my journalistic world, specifically when I was a beauty journalist and a celebrity interviewer on magazines. I used to go to events and I would see all the same people, all the same journalists, all the same broadcasters, all the same. And we were very much like this sort of traveling family that would go from launch to launch to event to event. We'd see each other all the time. When I went into the podcasting space, you do not meet other podcasters, particularly at the beginning. And we're talking nearly 10 years ago. There were no podcast meetups. There were no podcast kind of mixers. People very much in isolation, in silo, were making podcasts, very much like me in my office, and publishing them. And that was it. And you didn't really come across other podcasters. Now, the landscape of podcasting has changed wildly. I don't think I need to unpick that anymore in this podcast. But a few years, so my only real podcast friends, other than the people who I knew through the beauty industry who had podcasts like Kirby from Los Angeles, Jess and Jen from Fat Mascara, which is no longer. Jules Von Hepp had started his podcast and then subsequently went on to do Wobble. So they were really the only people that I knew in the podcasting space. There's going to be others and I'm going to really get cross that I've forgotten. But anyway, the only people that I knew were the girls from Red Handed, Hannah and Saruti. They had just started. I started listening to their podcast. My brother was listening to their podcast and I just reached out to them and was like, I think what you're doing is really cool. Do you fancy coming on my show? And then fast forward many years, they hosted a dinner for Patreon because Patreon, they were doing very well. Thank you very much. They were generating a huge amount of revenue via their Patreon. And so Patreon said, hey, why don't you host a dinner with some podcasters? And they very kindly invited me along. And I met the guys from Straight Up is where I'm trying to get to. And we've stayed in touch ever since. They do a really great pop culture podcast. It's well worth a listen. And so Eleanor got in touch with me the other day and said, why don't we do a trailer swap? And I thought that's a really good idea. So if you listen to them, you'll hear my trailer. And if you listen to me, you'll hear their trailer. So in the middle of this episode, I will be posting I'll be posting the trailer for you to enjoy. It's well worth looking at on your podcast app, but it's nice. I find it really nice because I think these are people who've come to the podcasting space. They're very inclusive. They're very nice. They're like, let's build each other up. Let's cross-pollinate, or cross-podinate as I used to call it, which is really nice. So let's champion them. So the first thing I wanted to discuss is the return of Lindsay Lohan. And the reason why I want to discuss the return of Lindsay Lohan is because I think it has thrown up for me quite an interesting, sort of odd. I noticed it and thought, oh yeah, no, that's really peculiar. That's really odd. That's really, that's alarming. I wonder if that's quite worrying. So for context, Lindsay Lohan has come back. And this isn't the first time. She has been back for a few years from what some would generously call a hiatus. But for many years, Lindsay was kind of in a no man's land of she was a disaster or a tragedy waiting to happen. She was very much, for a while, in the same category as, say, Britney Spears in terms of the worry about the way that she was behaving, about the worry about her lifestyle choices. There were clearly some issues. She did a reality show that was actually produced by Oprah, I believe. And I remember watching it during lockdown. I hadn't caught it when it actually went out and being really alarmed by it, like really alarmed by this young woman and some of the choices she was making and how uncomfortable it was that I was watching it. And it didn't feel as though this should be something that was up for public consumption. Anyway, the point being is that if you go back 10 years, there are lots of videos of Lindsay behaving in a way that does not look particularly great. And fast forward to now, she came back with a Christmas movie that was a Netflix movie, and then she did another one last year. She's now in Freakier Friday, which is the follow-up to Freaky Friday, which, side note, a couple of weekends ago, I was so shattered and so kind of, I don't want to say burnt out, because I do roll my eyes a little bit because I keep hearing that a lot, but I just overdone it and needed to take a weekend where I did nothing. And my nothing on that weekend, or actually it was just a Saturday, because then by the time I'd rotted in bed for a day, I was very keen on the Sunday to get up and like do some exercise and get out in the world and do some stuff. But on the day when I just thought, I'm actually not going to get up today because I'm tired and I don't want to. I did what any sane 47-year-old woman does, and I went back to the things that brought me comfort when I was a teenager and a young adult, and that meant that I watched Freaky Friday, and had a slight moment when I realised that Jamie Lee Curtis's character in the film is younger than I am now. And then I watched The Princess Diaries, and genuinely, it's a balm. Those films soothe your soul. I forget Mickey and Minnie and all that. Like, if you want Disney to cure you, you just have to watch things like that. I also actually did The Devil Wears Prada as well, which I didn't mean to. I always feel like I'm really excited by The Devil Wears Prada, and then there's a moment where it's sort of like the jeopardy comes in, where like the boyfriend, the relationship, and the friends are cross with her, and it's always then that I want to turn it off, because I'm like, I don't like it anymore. But I was sort of doing other things, and then ended up sort of getting past that point and really enjoyed it. I hadn't watched The Devil Wears Prada for years. Anyway, so that's a little insight into my world. But Lindsay is back, and Lindsay looks better than ever. Like, better than ever. It's not just the fact that she looks great, but she's poised. She is fantastic in interviews. She is professional. Even video footage that I saw of her on the red carpet, or waiting to go onto the red carpet at the Freaky Friday premiere in London, you can see somebody who's very aware of like angles, where she needs to be, like very, very engaged, like almost like a sports person, just very engaged in what needs to be done. Not in a way that's clinical, but in a way that you sort of, people talk about the flow state. You could just see that she was very in the zone, professional, wanting to hit her mark, wanting to hit all the right beats, wanting to do all the right things. And again, if you watch any of her interviews, she's absolutely delightful. Anyway, that's sort of a side note. But she does look great, and whatever speculation there has been about whatever work she has had done, I don't want to get into that. The fact is that she looks like a perfect human being. Her hair is perfect, her face is perfect. She also looks physically absolutely stunning. She looks great in all the clothes that I've seen her wearing. Which leads me to the point that we have gone from Lindsay the disaster, which she has every right to be able to put behind her, by the way, but Lindsay the disaster, to this perfectly poised, beautiful, gorgeously presented version of Lindsay, which is great. But we haven't joined the dots. And the reason why it came to my mind as being like that's weird, is because it made me think, so if somebody kind of just takes Britney out of circulation for a while, sorts out her hair extensions, sorts out her makeup, like gives her one of those mini facelifts, and then she appears as Britney was right at the beginning of her career, when she was bouncy, bright, bubbly and sweet and funny. If she just did that, would everybody go, would nobody ask questions about what has happened? I think it's really interesting. I think that I think Lindsay Lohan is unbelievably talented. She's got screen presence that so many people would kill for. Like, if you've ever seen The Parent Trap, which I very nearly watched on that bed-rotting day, you will know that she is a phenomenal actress and was from a very early age. Again, another side note here. A lot of those films really do hammer home some terrible parenting. The Parent Trap, two parents decide to split up, and so they split up the twins and don't ever tell them that they existed. They don't ever tell them what happened to the mother, what happened. Like, that's really messed up. And then Freaky Friday kind of gets a pass, I think. Yeah, no, it gets a pass. There's nothing that sort of worries me there. But then The Princess Diaries, her dad's a prince, doesn't have anything to do with her, but writes to her on her birthday every year. So it's kind of reckless abandonment. And I'm sure there's more to it than that. But anyway, I just kind of thought, God, that's really peculiar. Like, these parents, particularly in The Parent Trap, like, okay, you don't want to be together, fair enough, but you just split the sisters up? That makes no sense. Anywho, I have really gone off. So it is just very puzzling to me, or is culturally I think, significant, because what it's kind of signposting is, if you have been down and out, if you have very publicly clearly been struggling, if you have publicly talked about your issues with alcohol and drugs, as I believe Lindsay has. I don't think she was ever, I think she's been quite, like, there were drug tests and there were various things that were going on. Like, it's all been in the public domain back in the day. Maybe she's earned the right to be able to just come back, but I think there's a really interesting story in how have you turned it around, because most people don't. Most people not only don't turn it around in the way that you have, but most people don't get the luxury of a comeback. And I have just been watching all of her press and all of the coverage, and I think it's so funny to me. It's so brilliant what she's done. I don't want to say that I begrudge her sobriety, her success, any of those things. It just, to me, it's the fact that no one is talking about the fact that she has transformed herself. And that to me is so interesting, because in the press particularly, we will go into the minutiae of someone's breakdown. We will go into the minutiae of people and how they are falling apart. And yet when they pull themselves back together, as she has done in a way that I've not seen before. I mean, I think the only other person who can probably claim a similar renaissance resurgence is Robert Downey Jr. And yet he has had to reference it. He has had to talk about it. And I just think it's really interesting. So what do you think? Have you noticed it? Have you been thinking, crikey, how did she do that? How did she go from that Lindsay? I mean, who doesn't remember the DJing? But how's she gone from that Lindsay to this Lindsay? Like, what has happened? Because something's happened and it worked. And I suppose that's the thing. It's like, if you know the secret, why are you not sharing it? Or when can you share it? Or please share it, like, because it's impressive what's been achieved here, don't you think?
Straight Up is the best pop culture podcast around, like catching up with your smartest friends.
Pop culture journalism at its finest. It's perfectly filled the high-low-shaped hole in my life.
Fun, intelligent and well-researched, with the ideal mix of high and lowbrow.
We're Kathleen and Ellie, and that's just a taste of what our listeners think about Straight Up, the pop culture podcast with no filter that goes behind the biggest stories of the week every Thursday.
From film and TV to books, trends and celebrity, we bring the sharpest takes and the smartest reviews to keep you completely in the know.
We promise showbiz gossip and behind-the-scenes insight you won't get anywhere else.
So subscribe now to Straight Up wherever you get your podcasts and join us each Thursday.
Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed the trailer from Straight Up. It's well worth a listen. Definitely go and find it on your preferred podcast platform. So whilst we're here, let's talk about And Just Like That, because I have definitely been hoisted by my own petard, as they say. Is that the expression? I have ragged on it. I have said how awful it is. I have questioned the sanity of the people writing. I have questioned so much. In fact, I was at dinner last week and I think spent quite a lot of the dinner talking to another journalist about how could they have done this? And then they announced that they're cancelling the show. And the day that you listen to this, if you're listening to the day that this goes live, is going to be the penultimate episode of And Just Like That ever. Not just And Just Like That, it will be the penultimate episode of Carrie, Miranda, Charlotte, Harry, Seema, LTW, Anthony. It will be them done forever. And when I read the news, I was sorely disappointed. And I guess, like, be careful what you wish for. Like, I never wished for the show to get cancelled. In fact, when people had said, oh, it won't come back next season, my response was, oh, I hope it does, because I will never not want to watch it. Like, I love these characters. But obviously it's not coming back. And I would imagine if I was Sarah Jessica Parker and I was listening to the feedback, I would be thinking, well, what is the point? Because I don't want the character to be left with this legacy. I want to salvage as much as possible. Let's see what happens in these last 2 episodes. But it was definitely a case of be careful what you wish for. Like I said, I didn't wish for it to end, but I must admit, I thought, even though I found it so difficult to watch, I enjoyed how difficult it was to watch. And the only reason I was cross with it, I didn't get so upset with the storytelling and the narrative and all of those things that, I mean, yes, there were some weird things that now make sense. Like, if you've been watching it, Seema and the deodorant, why was that over 2 episodes? Apparently one episode, that episode where Carrie and Aiden, spoiler alert, but you can't, was supposed to be one episode, but they decided to cut it in two, which is why those two shorter episodes seemed really clunky, because otherwise it would have been over an hour. Anyway, I just wanted to say that the reason I got cross with that show is because I needed it to do more, and I've talked about this at length on my Substack as well. But I was rooting for the characters, I was rooting for the story, I was rooting for the show, and I will really miss it. I will really miss it. And funnily enough, when I was really not enjoying this season, I went back and watched Sex and the City. One of those things where I had it on in the background a lot, but I would sit and watch a few episodes. And the brilliance of it is just, it's just a next level TV show. And it was of its time, obviously, but it was really fantastic. And then I went back and started watching season 1 of And Just Like That. And actually there was a lot more to it than has been in this last season. It had a little bit more pace. It had a little bit more going on. And it was it definitely feels as though they ran out of steam. I don't want to speak for them. Or maybe we'll watch it in 10 years time, or I'll watch it in 10 years time, being older than they are now in the show. And I'll be like, oh, I couldn't see it then. I couldn't see it then because I wasn't the right demographic, but this is absolutely brilliant. Maybe it will be that experience for me. I don't know. But I'm really sad to see it go. I'm sad that will be the end of Carrie, Miranda and Charlotte. Charlotte and Carrie specifically. The way that Miranda dealt with her son's pregnant girlfriend, or baby mama, as they were saying in the show, was just so un-Miranda Hobbs. It's just like, Miranda wouldn't do that. So I was a bit like, why'd you make her do that? But there were some funny moments in the last episode, and I thought, okay, so, and funnily enough, when it aired, a lot of people said, oh, this is finally it's getting good. And then the announcement came, a 3-minute Instagram post from Sarah Jessica Parker talking about Carrie and saying goodbye and all of those things. But I wish that maybe in the next episode it will all have been a dream, and then they'll come back with season 4 and it will be, what really happened? That was the nightmare. Now this is the fairy tale. And Big will be around, and there'll be no whiny Aiden or no whiny Wyatt, and we might have to deal with all of that. But anyway, we shall see. Okay, and to end, I just want to talk about something that I was going to talk about last week, and I thought, oh, there's not time, or I haven't really, actually, truth be told, it was occupying too much of my mind, and it was actually stopping me from sleeping. So if you have been following the Idaho Murders, again, the algorithm has not helped here, but there's been lots of things happening in that case in the last few weeks. And I have found it to be absolutely haunting. I don't think any case has upset me and impacted me and affected me as much, other than Sarah Everard. I found it absolutely, completely haunting and terrifying. And there have been a few times where I've woken up in the middle of the night and I've 2:00 in the morning and thought, well, that's it, I'm not getting back to sleep, because I suddenly think about it and I just can't relax. Now, that's not to say that I want you to have a serious amount of distress and unhappiness, but it is really interesting, I think. And I just wanted to flag the fact that the girls at Red Handed, who I talked about earlier on in the episode, they did some really good podcasts on the Idaho Murders. And actually, they also did some really good podcasts on the Diddy trial, which I talked to you about. Again, I was talking to someone about this last week and how I was ready for the trial of the century. I was so ready for the Diddy trial because I thought, this is it. This is going to bring down so many people in showbiz. This is going to shine a light on some really rank behavior. I am so happy that this has come to pass. I am delighted that the Diddy trial is going to happen. And then it burnt out in weeks and he got away with it pretty much. So I found it to be really disappointing. However, the reason I'm talking about that is that the girls, Suruthi and Hannah, have, funnily enough, it's Hannah and Suruthi. I've never said Suruthi and Hannah before, which is why I went blah, blah, blah. But Hannah and Suruthi have covered both of the cases really brilliantly, I think. And yeah, I don't want people to get nightmares, but I think if you are into true crime, or if you are, it sounds terrible saying into true crime when people died, but if those sorts of cases are the kind of things that you find the intricacies of them quite interesting, like I know that the Amy Bradley documentary on Netflix is really popular at the moment. I actually thought Heather McDonald said something really interesting about that. She's Heather McDonald, who's another podcaster who I don't know. I'd like to interview her though. She's fascinating. She covers pop culture, true crime, things like that. And she said that she thinks that Amy Bradley was on the balcony and that people can sometimes get a little bit hypnotized by the water, and she thinks that she either fell or she jumped. And that's why nobody heard her in the cabin, because she never walked back through. There's all of these conspiracies about she was sold into white slave trade and all of those sorts of things. But I thought, actually, when I listened to Heather, I thought I can see why that conclusion has been drawn. But that's like number one on the documentaries on Netflix at the moment. So obviously this is the kind of thing that captures people's attention. But I just think the Idaho murders, in terms of sort of really seeing effective police work in some instances, but also, as the girls were saying on Red Handed, there will be no trial because of a plea deal that was taken. But how interesting that is, and how actually that might be the better outcome. Anyway, it was all really fascinating, but all I would say is, if you're going onto social media and you start looking for it, be prepared for the the AI reenactments, because they will mess you up. Don't watch them. They mess me up so badly. That is all I'm going to share with you in this episode. I hope you enjoyed the cross-pollination with the lovely Straight Up. You'll be able to hear my trailer on their podcast. So if you do go and listen, you'll be able to hear my voice too. But please do get in touch. I'm going to try and be a little bit more active on Substack in the chat. I mean, famous last words, because I tried to do that with Facebook and that didn't really ever get off the ground. But let's try and make it work, shall we? Let's try and chat to each other in the Substack chat, because that I can access really easily and can get back to. And it's just, I think it's a slightly nicer forum. And obviously, if you aren't subscribed to my Substack, please do subscribe. It was actually something I wrote on Substack about feeling like an idiot for not taking Ozempic, that then got picked up by the Times and then ended up being a splash in one of the weekend supplements. So please do make sure you're subscribed to my Substack, because what I write there might end up in your, I don't know, your weekend paper or in a magazine. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Anyway, I'll put all the links to where you can follow me, find me, get in touch with me, etc. in the show notes. And I will also put a link to everything that I've mentioned. And I'll also put a link to Straight Up, so you can go over there, follow them and have a listen to their show. But anyway, that's Bullet Points. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you on the next one.